12 celebs you didn't know were in same-sex relacy, then and now 2025. Hollywood has always sold us perfect love stories, but what happens when those stories break the rules we were never taught to question? Behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, some of the world's biggest stars lived relationships that challenged fame, labels, and expectations. These weren't scripted romances or publicity stunts. They were real connections that sparked controversy, curiosity, and cultural change. In today's video, we uncover the same-sex relationships and rumored connections you probably never knew existed, and why they still matter today. Were these relationships misunderstood, or simply ahead of their time? Watch closely, then share your thoughts below. Subscribe and join the discussion on Celebrity Couples Hollywood, where real stories spark real conversations. Bella Hadid and Stella Maxwell. In the ever-evolving world of celebrity relationships, few rumored same-sex connections have generated as much intrigue as Bella Hadid and Stella Maxwell. Both women stand at the very top of the fashion industry, celebrated not only for their striking beauty, but also for their influence on modern modeling culture. When whispers of a possible romantic connection surfaced in 2015, the speculation quickly became a global talking point, less because of scandal, and more because it reflected a shifting conversation around sexuality, visibility, and privacy in Hollywood. Bella Hadid, born in 1996, rose rapidly to international fame as one of the most recognizable supermodels of her generation. With countless runway appearances for luxury fashion houses and multiple Model of the Year honors, Bella's career has been closely followed by fans and media alike. At the time of the rumors, however, she had never publicly identified as part of the LGBTQ+ community, making any suggestion of a same-sex relationship particularly attention-grabbing. Her public image remained focused on fashion, health advocacy, and her high-profile relationships with men, leaving little room for clarification without personal disclosure. Stella Maxwell, by contrast, had long been openly gay and outspoken about LGBTQ+ representation. Born in 1990 and raised internationally, Stella became one of the most recognizable Victoria's Secret angels, known for her edgy presence and confident individuality. Prior to 2015, she had already been linked romantically to several public figures, including Kristen Stewart, and was widely regarded as comfortable living openly in her truth. Her openness often placed her at the center of conversations about queerness in fashion and entertainment. The speculation surrounding Bella Hadid and Stella Maxwell intensified after a Love magazine party in 2015, where multiple eyewitnesses claimed the two models were seen displaying affectionate behavior away from the main crowd. Reports alleged flirtation and kissing, while photographs from the event showed them posing closely together in ways fans described as intimate. Importantly, no verified images or first-hand confirmations ever emerged to definitively prove a romantic relationship. Neither Bella nor Stella addressed the rumors publicly. Their representatives also declined to comment, a silence that allowed speculation to linger for years. From an ethical standpoint, this lack of confirmation matters. Without direct acknowledgement, the connection remains firmly categorized as unconfirmed rumor, not fact. This distinction is critical in an era increasingly concerned with respecting personal boundaries and avoiding forced labels. What made the situation culturally significant was not whether the relationship was real, but how audiences responded. Many fans praised the possibility of two high-profile models challenging traditional expectations, while others highlighted the importance of not pressuring anyone to disclose their sexuality. The conversation itself reflected a broader social shift, one where same-sex attraction was no longer treated as shocking, but where privacy began to matter more than speculation. Nearly a decade later, the rumored romance between Bella Hadid and Stella Maxwell stands as a moment in pop culture history rather than a confirmed chapter in either woman's personal life. It represents how visibility, curiosity, and restraint intersect in celebrity culture. Whether friends, confidants, or something more, their story ultimately reminds audiences that not every relationship needs definition, and that sometimes the most responsible narrative is one that respects what was never claimed. In a media landscape hungry for labels, Bella Hadid and Stella Maxwell unintentionally became symbols of a changing era, one where love, identity, and silence can coexist without explanation. Cameron Diaz and an unnamed woman. In an industry where image is often carefully curated and personal histories are selectively revealed, Cameron Diaz and an unnamed woman became part of a meaningful cultural conversation, not through scandal or rumor, but through honesty. Unlike many celebrity stories shaped by speculation, this one emerged directly from Diaz herself, offering a rare example of openness that challenged long-standing assumptions about sexuality in Hollywood. Cameron Diaz has spent decades as one of America's most recognizable film stars, known for blockbuster hits such as There's Something About Mary, Charlie's Angels, and The Holiday. Her public persona has always leaned toward authenticity, funny, unfiltered, and refreshingly self-aware. In 2014, during a period when conversations about sexual fluidity were gaining momentum, Diaz made a statement that caught public attention without seeking controversy. She casually remarked that many women experience attraction to other women at some point in their lives, a comment that immediately sparked discussion across entertainment media. The conversation deepened later that year during her appearance on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen. When asked directly about her own experiences, Diaz responded with characteristic bluntness. She confirmed that she had, in fact, been with a woman, clarifying that while the question had not specified the nature of the experience, the answer was still yes. Importantly, she did not provide a name, timeline, or further detail, nor did she attempt to frame the moment as a defining relationship. That decision matters. The unnamed woman referenced by Cameron Diaz remains exactly that: unnamed, unidentified, and intentionally protected from public scrutiny. Diaz did not romanticize the experience, nor did she sensationalize it. Instead, she presented it as part of her broader understanding of human attraction, emphasizing that curiosity and experience do not always require permanent labels. Equally significant is what Diaz did not do. She did not redefine her sexual orientation, nor did she claim a specific identity within the LGBTQ+ spectrum. She continued to identify as straight, while also acknowledging that sexuality can be experiential rather than rigid. This nuance resonated with many viewers, particularly women who felt seen by a narrative that allowed space for exploration without pressure to categorize. From a cultural standpoint, Diaz's admission carried weight because it came from someone long positioned as a mainstream romantic lead. At a time when celebrities were often encouraged to either conceal or over-explain personal experiences, her matter-of-fact delivery felt disarming. There was no dramatic reveal, no follow-up interviews capitalizing on the moment, just a calm acknowledgement that attraction can exist beyond expectation. Over the years, Cameron Diaz has remained consistent in her stance. She has continued to advocate for honesty, self-acceptance, and personal boundaries, while avoiding unnecessary exposure of private experiences. The unnamed woman at the center of this discussion was never turned into a headline, a narrative device, or a symbol. That restraint reinforced the core message. Not every experience exists for public consumption. In retrospect, the story of Cameron Diaz and an unnamed woman is less about a relationship and more about representation through truth. It contributed to a broader shift in how sexuality is discussed, especially by women in the public eye. Rather than offering a confession meant to shock, Diaz offered something far more impactful: normalization. In a culture that often demands clarity at all costs, Cameron Diaz reminded audiences that some truths do not need elaboration to be valid. And in doing so, she helped redefine what honesty in Hollywood can look like: quiet, respectful, and entirely on one's own terms. Carmen Electra and Joan Jett. Few rumored same-sex pairings have captured public imagination quite like Carmen Electra and Joan Jett, two women whose public images could not have seemed more different, yet whose alleged connection suggested that attraction often defies labels, genres, and expectations. Rooted in admiration, artistic overlap, and a moment that sparked years of speculation, their story remains one of pop culture's most intriguing what-ifs. Carmen Electra rose to prominence in the 1990s as a model, actress, and pop culture icon, known for her comedic timing, high-energy performances, and unmistakable glamour. From Baywatch to parody films, she cultivated an image that blended sex appeal with humor, never taking herself too seriously. Over the years, Electra also became an outspoken ally of the LGBTQ+ community, frequently expressing support for equality and inclusion, though she generally kept her own private life carefully managed. Joan Jett, by contrast, had long stood as a symbol of rebellion. As a pioneering rock musician and frontwoman, she carved out space for women in a male-dominated genre with unapologetic confidence. Known for her raw sound, leather-clad aesthetic, and feminist edge, Jett's influence extended far beyond music. She was widely respected not only for her talent, but also for her authenticity. Unlike many artists of her era, Joan Jett was openly gay, making her visibility especially meaningful during decades when such openness carried professional risk. Their paths crossed through creative collaboration. Carmen Electra appeared in one of Joan Jett's music videos, a moment that publicly highlighted their mutual respect. Electra had openly spoken about being a fan of Jett since her youth, expressing admiration for her strength and individuality. That admiration, according to speculation, may have evolved into something more, though never officially confirmed. The rumors intensified around 2007, when sources close to both women claimed they were spotted sharing a passionate kiss during one of Joan Jett's concerts. The alleged incident quickly circulated through entertainment media, igniting widespread curiosity. For fans, the pairing felt unexpected yet oddly compelling. A Hollywood bombshell and a rock and roll trailblazer linked by a moment that suggested genuine chemistry. Despite the attention, neither Carmen Electra nor Joan Jett ever addressed the rumors directly. There were no confirmations, no denials, and no attempts to reframe the narrative. Electra continued to voice her support for LGBTQ+ rights without elaborating on her own orientation, while Jett remained characteristically private about her personal relationships. The silence left the story suspended between speculation and possibility. What made the rumored connection particularly fascinating was how it challenged stereotypes. Electra, often associated with mainstream glamour and comedy, and Jett, synonymous with counterculture and resistance, represented two worlds rarely seen intersecting romantically in public discourse. If the rumors were true, they suggested that attraction can emerge across cultural boundaries, between personas that appear incompatible on the surface. Even without confirmation, the story of Carmen Electra and Joan Jett holds lasting significance. It reflects a moment when same-sex speculation began to shift from scandal to curiosity, and when public reaction leaned more toward intrigue than outrage. Importantly, it also underscores the importance of restraint. Without direct acknowledgement from those involved, the narrative remains responsibly framed as unverified rumor, not fact. In the end, their alleged bond endures as a compelling footnote in celebrity history, one that illustrates how admiration, identity, and mystery often coexist. Whether rooted in truth or misinterpretation, Carmen Electra and Joan Jett became symbols of a broader idea: that connection does not always fit neatly into expectations, and that some stories are powerful precisely because they were never fully told. Charlize Theron and unnamed women. Among Hollywood's most respected and accomplished actresses, Charlize Theron has long been admired not only for her talent, but for her willingness to speak candidly about topics many celebrities avoid. When discussions turned to sexuality, Theron did not offer rumors or half-truths. She offered clarity. Her acknowledgement of past same-sex experiences with unnamed women became an important moment in how attraction, identity, and openness are discussed in the public sphere. Charlize Theron's career spans decades, marked by critically acclaimed performances and an Oscar-winning role in Monster. Known for her intelligence, discipline, and fearlessness on screen, she has also cultivated a reputation off-screen for being thoughtful and direct. In 2017, during a revealing interview, Theron shared that she had, in her younger years, engaged in sexual relationships with women. The admission was neither sensational nor dramatic. Instead, it was framed as a matter-of-fact reflection on her personal history. Crucially, Theron was careful with language. She described these experiences as experimental and made it clear that they occurred earlier in her life. She also stated explicitly that she identifies as straight, drawing a distinction between experience and identity. In doing so, she introduced a nuance often missing from celebrity narratives: the idea that attraction and exploration do not always redefine how a person understands themselves long-term. The women involved were never named, and Theron offered no identifying details. This omission was intentional and responsible. By keeping these individuals anonymous, she reinforced an essential boundary, acknowledging personal truth without exposing others to unwanted attention. In an era where oversharing is often rewarded, her restraint stood out as a deliberate choice rooted in respect. What elevated Theron's comments beyond personal disclosure was the message of normalization that accompanied them. She emphasized that same-sex attraction should not be treated as unusual, taboo, or worthy of shock. Rather than framing her experiences as exceptions, she spoke of them as part of the broader human spectrum. Her tone suggested that curiosity and self-discovery are natural, particularly in youth, and do not require justification. This perspective resonated widely. For many viewers, especially women, Theron's words validated experiences that rarely receive thoughtful representation. She did not claim a label to satisfy public curiosity, nor did she distance herself from the LGBTQ+ community. Instead, she acknowledged fluidity while maintaining personal clarity, demonstrating that both can coexist. Importantly, Charlize Theron did not revisit the topic repeatedly in subsequent interviews. She did not build a narrative around it, nor did she allow it to overshadow her professional identity. The moment stood on its own, free from exploitation. That restraint reinforced its authenticity and prevented it from becoming a headline-driven talking point rather than a meaningful contribution. Within the context of Hollywood history, Theron's admission marked a subtle shift. It reflected a growing comfort among public figures to discuss sexuality without fear of misinterpretation, while also asserting the right to self-definition. Her approach rejected the idea that one experience must define an entire identity. Ultimately, the story of Charlize Theron and unnamed women is not about scandal or speculation. It is about honesty, delivered without excess, exploration acknowledged without labels imposed, and privacy maintained even in transparency. In a culture eager for absolutes, Theron offered something rarer: balance. Her words continue to matter because they remind audiences that human experience is complex, personal, and deserving of respect, whether named or unnamed, explained or left simply as truth. Demi Lovato and Ruby Rose. Few rumored same-sex pairings have stirred as much curiosity as Demi Lovato and Ruby Rose, largely because their alleged connection existed at the intersection of openness and ambiguity. Unlike classic celebrity romances defined by public appearances or official statements, this story unfolded through social media moments, suggestive comments, and deliberate silence. mirroring how modern relationships are often perceived and debated in the digital age. Demi Lovato has built a career grounded in vulnerability and truth. Rising to fame at a young age, she became known not only for her powerful voice, but also for her willingness to speak openly about mental health, recovery, and self-acceptance. Over the years, Demi has consistently supported the LGBTQ+ community, advocating for inclusion and self-expression. However, she has also been careful about labeling her own sexuality, often emphasizing that identity is deeply personal and not owed to public explanation. Ruby Rose, on the other hand, has long been recognized as a visible and outspoken figure within the LGBTQ+ space. The Australian model, actress, and television host gained international attention through Orange is the New Black and later Batwoman. Ruby has openly identified as gender fluid and has frequently spoken about living authentically, even when doing so invites scrutiny. Her public presence is unapologetic, bold, and often intentionally provocative, qualities that naturally draw attention. Speculation about Demi Lovato and Ruby Rose began when fans noticed their playful social media interactions, which quickly escalated into widespread discussion. The rumors intensified after Ruby Rose posted, and then swiftly deleted, a message that many interpreted as hinting at past intimacy with Demi. Though the post was never officially preserved or confirmed, its brief appearance was enough to ignite headlines and fan theories across platforms. Despite the growing attention, Demi Lovato never confirmed nor denied the rumors. Instead, she maintained a consistent stance. Her love life was private, and her autonomy mattered more than public curiosity. This response aligned with Demi's broader philosophy, embracing honesty without surrendering control over personal boundaries. Ruby Rose, meanwhile, added fuel to the speculation through cryptic remarks, neither clarifying nor retracting implications, a pattern familiar to those who follow her public persona. What makes this rumored connection culturally significant is not whether it was real, but what it represented. At a time when conversations around sexuality were becoming more nuanced, Demi and Ruby embodied two different approaches to visibility. Ruby embraced labels and openness as tools of empowerment, while Demi resisted categorization, emphasizing freedom over definition. Their rumored link highlighted how attraction, identity, and disclosure do not follow a single path. Importantly, there were no confirmed sightings, no official statements, and no verifiable evidence of a romantic relationship. As such, the story remains firmly within the realm of unconfirmed speculation, not established fact. This distinction is essential to avoid misinformation and to respect the individuals involved. Years later, the rumored connection between Demi Lovato and Ruby Rose remains one of Hollywood's most talked-about mysteries, not because it promised scandal, but because it reflected a changing cultural landscape. It showed that same-sex rumors no longer automatically lead to backlash, but instead to discussion about agency, privacy, and the right to define oneself, or not define at all. In the end, their story serves as a reminder that visibility comes in many forms. Whether expressed openly or guarded carefully, authenticity belongs to the individual. And sometimes the most meaningful statement a celebrity can make is choosing not to explain. Hugh Hefner and an unnamed man. When the name Hugh Hefner is mentioned, the image that comes to mind is almost universally the same. The founder of Playboy, surrounded by women, symbolizing a brand built on heterosexual fantasy and sexual liberation. Yet behind that meticulously constructed public persona lies a lesser-known and far more complex narrative, one involving an unnamed man, revealed not through gossip columns, but through biographical accounts that challenged long-held assumptions about Hefner's private life. Hugh Hefner spent decades shaping an empire that celebrated sexual freedom, curiosity, and exploration. As the architect of Playboy magazine, he positioned himself as a champion of progressive ideas, including free expression and personal liberty. However, despite this outward openness, Hefner rarely spoke in depth about his own sexuality beyond what aligned with his public image. That silence made later revelations all the more surprising. According to biographies written about Hefner's life, he reportedly had at least one sexual encounter with another man. This detail emerged not as a central theme, but as a factual footnote, suggesting that even the man most associated with sexual transparency maintained boundaries around certain personal experiences. The identity of the man involved was never disclosed, and no attempt was made to sensationalize the encounter within the biographical context. What drew even more attention was an additional claim made by one of Hefner's former girlfriends, who alleged that he was bisexual and had been involved in a same-sex relationship lasting approximately 5 years. If accurate, this would represent a significant and sustained aspect of Hefner's private life, one that stood in stark contrast to his carefully maintained public image. However, it is important to emphasize that Hefner never publicly confirmed or denied this allegation. The lack of confirmation matters. Without Hefner's direct acknowledgement, these accounts remain unverified claims, grounded in secondary sources rather than first-hand testimony. From a responsible storytelling perspective, they should be treated as part of the broader discussion surrounding Hefner's complexity, not as established fact. What can be stated with certainty is that the claims originated from biographical material and personal accounts, not tabloid speculation. Culturally, these revelations added nuance to Hefner's legacy. They suggested that his philosophy of sexual exploration may have extended beyond the boundaries he publicly embraced. At the same time, they highlighted a paradox. Even a man who built his brand on openness still exercised control over which truths he shared. This duality reflects the era in which Hefner rose to prominence, a time when same-sex relationships, particularly involving powerful male figures, were far less accepted. Importantly, the unnamed man at the center of these claims has remained anonymous. This anonymity protects not only personal privacy, but also underscores a key theme of this story, that sexual experiences do not always require public validation. Whether the encounter was brief or meaningful, it existed independently of public perception. In retrospect, the story of Hugh Hefner and an unnamed man is not about rewriting history, but about expanding it. It invites audiences to reconsider rigid narratives and recognize that identity, even for those who appear fully transparent, can be layered and private. Hefner's legacy remains controversial, influential, and deeply debated. But this lesser-known chapter reminds us that even icons of sexual freedom lived with unspoken complexities. Ultimately, this story is less about revelation and more about reflection. It challenges the idea that any public figure can be fully understood through the image they project, and reinforces that human experience, even at its most public, often contains truths left quietly unnamed. John Mayer and Perez Hilton. In the landscape of celebrity culture, few brief encounters have generated as much discussion as the incident involving John Mayer and Perez Hilton. Unlike long-term relationships or carefully staged appearances, their story centers on a single, highly publicized moment, one that ignited questions about intent, identity, and the fine line between provocation and personal truth in Hollywood. John Mayer, celebrated for his musicianship and introspective songwriting, has long been associated with high-profile relationships with women and a carefully cultivated image as a thoughtful, if sometimes polarizing, artist. Known for chart-topping albums and candid interviews, Mayer has never shied away from controversy, yet he has consistently identified as straight. His willingness to speak openly has often drawn both praise and criticism, placing him at the center of public discourse more than once. Perez Hilton, on the other hand, built his career on confrontation. As one of the most influential celebrity bloggers of the 2000s, Hilton became known for exposing rumors, challenging public figures, and pushing boundaries within entertainment journalism. Openly gay and unapologetically outspoken, he positioned himself as both commentator and provocateur, unafraid to insert himself directly into the stories he covered. The controversy began when rumors surfaced about a kiss shared between Mayer and Hilton. The incident quickly gained traction online, fueled by speculation about Mayer's sexuality and Hilton's reputation for amplifying scandal. Unlike many rumors that rely on anonymous sources, this one escalated because both parties eventually addressed it, albeit in very different ways. John Mayer later acknowledged the kiss, offering a vivid and deliberate explanation. He described it as the only time he had ever kissed a man, characterizing the act as intentional provocation rather than romantic or sexual interest. Mayer emphasized that the moment was meant to be shocking, even calling it the dirtiest kiss he had ever given, not because of desire, but because of the statement it made. In his account, the kiss was performative, rooted in rebellion and impulse rather than attraction. Perez Hilton's response told a different story. Never one to retreat from controversy, Hilton used the incident to publicly question Mayer's sexual identity, suggesting that the kiss could indicate bisexuality. His commentary reignited debates across social media and entertainment platforms, drawing in fans, critics, and commentators who dissected every word from both men. The disagreement highlighted a broader tension. Who gets to define the meaning of an intimate moment? The participants themselves, or the public watching from the outside? What made this episode particularly significant was its timing. At a moment when conversations about sexuality were becoming more visible, yet still highly polarized, the incident exposed how quickly assumptions could take hold. Mayer's insistence on intent clashed with Hilton's interpretation, leaving audiences divided. Some viewed the kiss as harmless experimentation or humor, while others criticized it as trivializing same-sex intimacy by framing it as shock value. Importantly, there has never been any evidence of a romantic or ongoing relationship between John Mayer and Perez Hilton. The story remains confined to that singular interaction and its aftermath. No further encounters were confirmed, and Mayer continued to state clearly that he did not identify as anything other than straight. Hilton, meanwhile, maintained his role as commentator, allowing the moment to live on as part of pop culture debate rather than personal closure. Years later, the incident remains memorable not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed about celebrity narratives. It showed how a single act can be interpreted through radically different lenses, shaped by reputation, power dynamics, and public expectation. The story of John Mayer and Perez Hilton ultimately serves as a case study in how quickly meaning can be assigned and contested when fame, identity, and spectacle collide. Rather than offering definitive answers, their story leaves behind questions that continue to resonate. Where does personal expression end and public interpretation begin? And who truly controls the narrative once the spotlight turns on? Lindsay Lohan and Samantha Ronson. The relationship between Lindsay Lohan and Samantha Ronson stands as one of the most talked about same-sex celebrity romances of the late 2000s. Not because it was carefully curated or quietly protected, but because it unfolded loudly, publicly, and under relentless scrutiny. At a time when LGBTQ+ relationships were gaining visibility but still carried stigma, their romance became both a cultural flashpoint and a cautionary tale about fame, exposure, and emotional vulnerability. Lindsay Lohan was already a household name when the relationship began. Rising to fame as a child star and transitioning into a leading actress with films like Mean Girls, Lohan's life had long been lived under the microscope. By the late 2000s, her career success was increasingly overshadowed by tabloid attention, legal issues, and concerns about her well-being. Known previously for dating men, Lohan surprised many when she began a romantic relationship with Samantha Ronson, a DJ and music producer from a prominent British family, around 2008. Samantha Ronson, while less famous than Lohan, was well established in music and nightlife circles. She was known for her low-key demeanor, artistic focus, and preference for staying out of tabloid drama, an approach that would soon be tested. When their relationship became public, it attracted intense media coverage almost immediately. Paparazzi followed them relentlessly, documenting not only affectionate moments, but also heated arguments that played out in public spaces. Unlike many celebrity relationships that rely on ambiguity, Lohan and Ronson's romance was open and unmistakable. They appeared together at events, spoke candidly about each other, and made little effort to hide their bond. For some fans, this visibility was empowering, signaling a shift toward greater acceptance of same-sex relationships in mainstream culture. For others, the constant exposure turned the relationship into spectacle rather than representation. The dynamic between Lohan and Ronson was widely described as intense and volatile. Videos and photographs of public confrontations circulated rapidly online, feeding tabloid narratives and public concern. While the relationship lasted roughly 1 year, the emotional toll appeared significant, particularly for Lohan, whose personal struggles became increasingly visible during this period. In later years, she would reflect on that chapter with notable honesty. Looking back, Lindsay Lohan has described her time with Samantha Ronson as a period she does not wish to relive, suggesting that the relationship, while meaningful, was ultimately damaging to her mental and emotional health. Importantly, she has spoken about the experience without assigning blame, instead acknowledging the complexity of loving intensely while navigating fame and personal instability. Since then, Lohan has chosen not to publicly label her sexual orientation, reinforcing her belief that such matters are deeply personal. Samantha Ronson, true to her nature, largely retreated from public discussion after the breakup. She did not capitalize on the attention or offer public commentary, allowing the relationship to remain part of Lohan's narrative rather than her own. That restraint added a layer of dignity to an otherwise chaotic chapter. The story of Lindsay Lohan and Samantha Ronson remains significant not because it ended, but because of what it revealed. It highlighted the pressures faced by same-sex couples in the public eye at a time when visibility came with heavy cost. It also underscored a crucial truth: representation without protection can become destructive. Ultimately, their relationship occupies a complex place in pop culture history, symbolic of progress, vulnerability, and the harsh realities of living authentically under constant observation. It reminds audiences that love, when amplified by fame, can illuminate change, but it can also magnify every fracture along the way. Marilyn Monroe and Natasha Lattès. The story of Marilyn Monroe and Natasha Lattès occupies a delicate and often misunderstood space in Hollywood history, one shaped not only by rumored intimacy, but by the rigid social boundaries of the mid-20th century. Unlike modern celebrity relationships fueled by visibility, their connection existed in an era where same-sex relationships were largely unspoken, carefully concealed, and often reframed to protect public image. What remains today is a narrative built from historical accounts, personal testimonies, and contextual evidence rather than confirmation, yet its significance is undeniable. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen, rose to fame as the ultimate Hollywood icon. Her image, carefully constructed by studios, embodied glamour, heterosexual desire, and American femininity. Behind that image, however, Monroe lived a life marked by vulnerability, emotional dependence, and a constant search for stability. It was during this formative period of her career that she formed a deeply influential bond with Natasha Lattès, her acting coach. Natasha Lattès was a respected drama teacher and mentor, known for her intense methods and psychological insight. She played a critical role in shaping Monroe's acting craft, guiding her through emotional preparation and character work at a time when Monroe was struggling for artistic credibility. Their professional relationship began in the late 1940s and quickly became deeply intertwined with Monroe's personal life. According to multiple accounts, the two women spent significant time together and were reported to have lived together for several years, an unusual arrangement that drew quiet attention within industry circles. Several biographical sources suggest that Monroe and Lattès were involved in a serious, emotionally intimate relationship lasting approximately 4 years. While explicit confirmation from Monroe herself does not exist, understandable given the social climate of the time, those close to her later described the bond as intense and consuming. Some accounts portray Lattès as both a guiding force and a controlling presence, exerting significant influence over Monroe's emotional world. The relationship allegedly ended around 1952, when Marilyn Monroe married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. The timing is notable. Marriage to a prominent male figure aligned perfectly with the studio-approved narrative of Monroe's public identity. In contrast, any same-sex involvement would have posed a serious risk to her career, potentially ending it altogether. During that era, homosexuality was widely stigmatized and could result in blacklisting or moral condemnation. What makes the Monroe-Lattès story especially compelling is not simply the suggestion of romantic involvement, but the broader context of secrecy and survival. If Monroe did experience bisexual attraction or a same-sex relationship, it existed in a world where acknowledgement was not an option. Silence was not avoidance, it was protection. Importantly, historians and biographers continue to emphasize caution. While the emotional closeness between Marilyn Monroe and Natasha Lattès is well documented, the romantic or sexual nature of their bond remains unverified. Responsible retelling requires acknowledging both the evidence and the limitations. This is not a confirmed love story, but a historically grounded possibility shaped by testimony and circumstance. Today, the narrative of Marilyn Monroe and Natasha Lattès is often revisited through a modern lens, one more open to complexity and nuance. Rather than rewriting Monroe's identity, the story invites reflection on how many lives were lived in partial truth, constrained by fear and expectation. It reminds us that history is not only written by what was said, but also by what could not be spoken. In the end, their connection stands as a poignant reminder of a Hollywood era where image outweighed authenticity, and where some relationships, no matter how meaningful, were destined to remain in the shadows. Mick Jagger and David Bowie. Few names in music history carry as much weight as Mick Jagger and David Bowie. As icons who consistently challenged convention, blurred boundaries, and reshaped popular culture, both men embodied artistic freedom long before it became fashionable. It is precisely this boundary-pushing legacy that has kept rumors of a deeper, more intimate connection between them alive for decades, transforming their alleged relationship into one of rock history's most enduring and debated narratives. Mick Jagger, the electrifying frontman of the Rolling Stones, cultivated a reputation as the ultimate rock star. His public image leaned heavily toward heterosexual excess, reinforced by countless relationships with women and a persona built on provocation and confidence. David Bowie, by contrast, openly embraced sexual fluidity far earlier than most of his contemporaries. In the early 1970s, Bowie publicly identified as bisexual, using his platform to challenge rigid ideas of masculinity, identity, and desire. Their contrasting approaches to sexuality made any suggestion of intimacy between them both controversial and compelling. The two artists moved within the same creative circles during the height of the glam rock era. They collaborated, socialized, and shared overlapping personal and professional spaces. Over time, whispers began to circulate that their connection extended beyond friendship. One of the most cited sources of this claim came from Angie Bowie, David Bowie's first wife. In interviews and her memoir, She alleged that she once walked in on Mick Jagger and David Bowie in bed together. While the claim was explosive, it has never been independently verified, and both men declined to publicly confirm or address the allegation in detail. Additional speculation was fueled by Ava Cherry, a singer and collaborator closely connected to Bowie. Cherry later suggested that Jagger and Bowie shared a highly passionate relationship, describing intense chemistry and periods when they lived in close proximity. According to her account, their bond was not merely experimental, but emotionally charged. Again, these statements added intrigue without offering definitive proof, leaving the story suspended between testimony and myth. The fascination surrounding their rumored relationship intensified in 1985, when Jagger and Bowie released their joint cover of "Dancing in the Street." The accompanying music video, filled with playful movement, exaggerated physical closeness, and flirtatious energy, captured public attention immediately. While the performance was widely interpreted as theatrical and humorous, many fans viewed it as a visual echo of long-standing rumors. Whether intentional or not, the video reinforced the idea that their connection defied simple categorization. Importantly, Mick Jagger never publicly identified as bisexual, and he consistently framed his sexuality within a heterosexual context. David Bowie, meanwhile, later clarified that while he had once identified as bisexual, he ultimately viewed sexuality as more complex and evolving. These differing perspectives complicate any attempt to draw clear conclusions about their alleged relationship. From a factual standpoint, there is no confirmed evidence of a romantic or sexual relationship between Mick Jagger and David Bowie. What exists instead is a convergence of eyewitness claims, personal recollections, and cultural interpretation. Responsible storytelling requires acknowledging this distinction. The story remains a rumor supported by anecdotal accounts, not established fact. Yet the significance of this narrative lies less in verification and more in symbolism. The rumored bond between Jagger and Bowie represents a moment in cultural history when boundaries were actively being questioned. It reflects an era of experimentation, musical, personal, and social, where identity was less fixed and more performative. Ultimately, Mick Jagger and David Bowie remain linked not by confirmed romance, but by shared legacy. Their rumored connection has endured because it aligns with who they were, artists unafraid to disrupt norms and invite ambiguity. Whether myth or reality, the story persists as part of rock mythology, a reminder that some legends survive precisely because they resist final definition. Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne. The relationship between Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne captured attention not because it was hidden or whispered about, but because it unfolded openly at a time when visibility itself had become a statement. Their connection, though relatively short-lived, resonated far beyond celebrity news, symbolizing a generational shift in how same-sex relationships were viewed, discussed, and accepted in the public eye. Paris Jackson, the daughter of the late music legend Michael Jackson, grew up under extraordinary scrutiny. As she entered adulthood, she gradually reclaimed control over her own narrative, speaking candidly about mental health, creativity, and identity. Prior to her rumored romance with Cara Delevingne, Paris had already publicly identified as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, expressing attraction to both men and women. Her openness was widely praised, particularly because it came from someone whose life had been shaped by relentless public attention from childhood onward. Cara Delevingne, meanwhile, was already known as one of fashion's most unconventional stars. Rising from supermodel status to acting roles in film and television, Cara built a reputation for defying expectations. She has been consistently open about her sexuality, often describing it as fluid, and has spoken openly about the importance of living authentically. By the time she and Paris Jackson were linked, Cara had become a prominent voice for LGBTQ+ visibility in both fashion and entertainment. Speculation about Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne began in 2017, when the two were frequently seen together at public events, parties, and casual outings. Their chemistry was difficult to ignore. Paparazzi photographs soon emerged, showing them kissing and holding hands, images that quickly spread across media outlets and social platforms. Unlike many rumored celebrity pairings, these moments were not ambiguous. Their body language and interactions strongly suggested a genuine romantic connection. Neither Paris nor Cara attempted to conceal the relationship. While they did not offer extensive interviews detailing their private life, their public appearances spoke clearly enough. Fans responded overwhelmingly with support, celebrating the pairing as a refreshing example of unapologetic self-expression. For many young viewers, seeing two high-profile women openly affectionate without scandal or apology felt significant, even affirming. The relationship, however, was relatively brief. As is often the case with young, highly visible celebrities, their paths eventually diverged. They went their separate ways without public drama, official statements, or attempts to assign blame. The absence of conflict or sensational fallout allowed the relationship to be remembered with respect rather than controversy. What made Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne's connection especially meaningful was its timing. By the late 2000s, public attitudes toward same-sex relationships were shifting rapidly, particularly among younger generations. Their romance arrived during a moment when visibility was increasingly normalized rather than sensationalized. Media coverage, while extensive, leaned more toward curiosity and celebration than condemnation. Importantly, both women continued to define themselves independently after the relationship ended. Paris has remained selective about discussing her romantic life, choosing instead to focus on music, art, and personal growth. Cara has continued to advocate for mental health awareness and LGBTQ+ representation, maintaining her commitment to authenticity regardless of public reaction. From a factual perspective, the relationship between Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne is one of the few in this discussion that was publicly visible and widely accepted as real, supported by photographic evidence rather than rumor alone. Yet its significance goes beyond confirmation. Their story represents more than a celebrity romance. It reflects a broader cultural moment, one where love between two women could exist openly without the need for secrecy or justification. Even though their time together was short, Paris Jackson and Cara Delevingne left a lasting impression, proving that visibility itself can be powerful, even when the relationship it represents does not last forever. In the evolving narrative of Hollywood relationships, theirs stands as a symbol of progress. Not perfect, not permanent, but undeniably meaningful. So where do we draw the line between public curiosity and personal truth when it comes to celebrity relationships? Some stars choose openness and visibility, while others protect their private lives at all costs. Yet both choices often face judgment. Are same-sex celebrity relationships treated with genuine acceptance today? Or are they still filtered through speculation and headlines? And when a romance is brief, does that make it less meaningful or simply honest? We want to hear what you think. Share your perspective in the comments and join the conversation with viewers around the world. If you enjoy thoughtful, fact-based stories about real Hollywood relationships, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay connected with Celebrity Couples Hollywood for more stories that go beyond the surface.